it feels like until those who are committing these crimes are brought to account, it's just going to be, a kind of a non-stop treadmill of people brought in, exploited, rescued, exploited.
Slavery in the UK is on the rise.
Might be convenient, they might give us cheap goods, but actually, is it worth it? Because in fact we are relying on the exploitation of far too many people.
People of all ages, of all backgrounds, whether they're men, women and children, they can all be affected by modern slavery, by human trafficking.
Мне предложили работу помощницей по дому. И я думала, что буду платить каждый месяц и иметь контракт на 2 года.
I was offered a job as a domestic helper, and I thought I would be paid every month and have a contract for 2 years. When I arrived in the UK, I had my passport taken from me. They wouldn't pay me, but told me they would save for me. I wasn't allowed to rest until all the children were sleeping and couldn't take time off. When I asked for some money to buy a phone to keep in touch with my friends and family, they got angry and abused me. I couldn't use the internet and was only allowed to leave for food shopping for the family or to visit church. When I said I didn't want to work for them anymore, they refused to give me my passport and claimed they owned it because they sponsored my visa. They then threatened to cancel my visa and report me to the police. They started to beat me and drag me by my hair.
Ndidi's story is not uncommon, with some estimates suggesting there are as many as 136,000 modern slaves in the UK. Multiple organisations are trying to break the cycle. Di runs Manumit, a coffee roasters dedicated to helping victims.
My personal definition of modern slavery is the exploitation of the vulnerable by the powerful. So whatever vulnerability that may be, it could be poverty, it could be learning difficulty, it could be emotional vulnerability. There will always be people that are willing to take advantage of those who are vulnerable and to exploit them for illicit gain, and that's essentially what modern slavery is.
A person might be in a vulnerable situation. For example, they might have moved to the country recently, and as a result they might not have any accommodation set up, they might not have any relatives, they might not have a job set up as well. They're in a vulnerable situation from the off, and as a result of that, gangmasters or human traffickers can quite often take advantage of this as well. They might offer the promise of a good job, a good place to stay, nice accommodation.
So what are organisations like Manumit doing to reduce modern slavery?
Manumit exists to provide employment and training and support to survivors of modern slavery. It's the only reason that we exist. If there was no survivors of slavery, if slavery wasn't a thing, there'd be no Manumit. But we exist to make sure that this is a workplace where the staff know they're valued, they're honoured, they're empowered, they're respected, and they're equipped to go on and do whatever they want to do with their lives. We want them to know they're precious. We want them to know that whatever they've been through, whatever their experience is, their identity is they are inherently precious, they are valuable, not because of what they can do or what they have done, but because of who they are. That really matters to us. So we treat everybody who comes here, and especially those who work here, as inherently precious. We say to all our staff, and we provide coaching for this, what is it that you want to do with your life? None of them that we've met so far said that, my dream is to be a coffee roaster. We don't expect that, but through the medium of coffee and roasting coffee, we want to create a place where people can say, actually, I'd love to do this or I'd love to do that, and we can point them down the path of further training, greater opportunities, and we can champion them as they seek to, move on with their lives and go down the kind of paths that they really feel excited to be going down.
Although support networks are available, many victims fear the consequences of reporting their captors.
I was trafficked to the UK and forced to work on a cannabis farm to pay a debt. I was threatened and told that if I did not work, they would hurt me and my family. I felt guilty. I couldn't do that to them. I was in the middle of nowhere, trapped on the farm. I was regularly beaten, attacked and spat on. I felt alone and helpless. Eventually, I was arrested, but I couldn't tell the police anything. I was scared of what they would do to them.
The legislation surrounding modern slavery is long and complex, with the law often coming down more harshly on victims than perpetrators.
The number of investigations into modern slavery is in the thousands, and there are, as I say, in 2021 there will have been, I don't know, well over 11,000 victims having been identified. So some of the cases will be because a victim has been identified. You know, maybe in a police raid, maybe they've escaped and come for help, and an investigation will be launched. But there are other investigations where police might be collecting intelligence, because quite often trafficking is what organised crime groups are doing. So they might be covertly collecting intelligence, they might be getting financial information, surveillance information, and then they will build a case against the traffickers. So there's different ways to build the case. Whichever way you go, they're complicated and complex. So these cases are difficult. And as a consequence, I think in England and Wales last year, there were about 300 prosecutions, I think, and if I added Scotland and Northern Ireland to those numbers, it wouldn't go up very much. So that just reflects the fact that, you know, lots of victims, quite a lot of investigations, far fewer prosecutions, and even fewer convictions.
There's a concerning number of vulnerable people who are trafficked and then re-trafficked, because although they were rescued, if there's nothing is done to change their vulnerability, they're just as liable to be trafficked again. And there are gangs out there who know exactly what they're doing when it comes to both finding those who are vulnerable and then exploiting them.
Because of this, often the only way people are found is through vigilant members of the public.
If it wasn't for a passerby, I don't know where I'd be now. Just hours before, I'd run away from the people imprisoning me. I was forced to come to the UK to work on a farm. As a 55-year-old, I was forced to work 14 hours a day, every day of the week, and often during the night too. I was threatened if I didn't comply. They gave me a horrible caravan to sleep in with no bathroom, no shower, and constantly breaking electricity. They barely paid me, if ever, for the painting and the cleaning work they forced me to do. Ashamed and exhausted, I was near breaking point. It was then that I ran. I had to free myself from the exhaustion and the physical and mental abuse I had suffered.
It's also about thinking about the reason why slavery and trafficking happen is it's really about making money. It's an economic crime, but it's an economic crime that makes money at the expense of people. You know, people are the commodity, they're the ones that are exploited. So we need to think about what can we do about that economic model, that business model. And some of it is what you and I can do. Because as consumers, we need to be asking ourselves if goods or services are very cheap. Well, why is that? And are they very cheap? Because they're based on the exploitation of other people.
It might be considering where your clothes have come from or where your fruit has been picked. And also considering as well, if it's especially cheap, if you're getting cheap fast fashion, why is it cheap? What's the payoff at the other end here? And then it's all about making these conscious choices to cut down on buying these cheap clothes, to make more conscious decisions, to think about where it's come from and why you should stop buying from those areas as well.
As individuals, we need to personally fight to honour and to protect those who are vulnerable.
Unless more is done to fight against the perpetrators, many more people will share these stories.